The islands of Ίμβρος and Tένεδος, or Gökçeada and Bozcaada, as they're now called in Turkish, are situated in the northeast corner of the Aegean Sea, near the entrance to the Dardanelles Straits, the sea channel that separates Europe and Asia. From time immemorial, Ίμβρος and Tένεδος have been inhabited by peoples of Hellenic origin, speaking the Greek language and passing on their Greek heritage and customs since earliest times. In 1456, the two islands were incorporated into the Sultan's domain. However, the Greek character of the island remained intact. Ottoman Empire statistics at the end of the 19th century showed Ίμβρος as having 10,000 Greek inhabitants and 99 Ottoman Turks, while in Tένεδος there were some 2,500 Greeks alongside 1,200 Turks. During the Balkan Wars in November 1912, a Greek naval victory wrested Ίμβρος and Tένεδος, as well as the rest of the northeastern Aegean islands, from the Turks. Then World War I intervened. The Gallipoli campaign saw the British take control of the two islands, which were handed over to Greece again by the Treaty of Sèvres in 1920. Greek rule was brief. It ended in 1922, after a disastrous Greek campaign in Asia Minor. The end of that war entailed a general political rearrangement in the area, enshrined by the Lausanne Treaty. The status of Ίμβρος and Tένεδος was an issue in the Lausanne negotiations. Conceding that the Greek population was in a majority, a quasi-autonomous local administration under Turkish sovereignty and authority was proposed, in order to ensure that the distinct ethnic character of the islands be safeguarded. On February 4, 1923, Turkey accepted the proposal. The fate of the islands was sealed. The protocol on Ίμβρος and Tένεδος stipulated that, and we quote, "No inhabitant of the islands shall be disturbed or molested under any pretext whatsoever on account of any military or political conduct or any assistance of any kind given by the person to a foreign power that's a signatory of the peace treaty. Full and complete amnesty will be granted to all the inhabitants of the islands for offences and crimes, whether political or under ordinary law, committed before this day." Unquote. Similarly, Article 14 of the Lausanne Treaty decreed, quote, "The islands of Ίμβρος and Tένεδος, remaining under Turkish sovereignty, shall enjoy a special administrative organization composed of local elements and furnishing every guarantee for the native non-Muslim population insofar as concerns local administration and the protection of persons and property. The agreements which have been or may be concluded between Greece and Turkey relating to the exchange of the Greek and Turkish populations will not be applied to the inhabitants of the islands of Ίμβρος and Tένεδος." Unquote. At Lausanne, Turkey also agreed to grant equal treatment for all religious and racial minorities living in its territory. In particular, Turkey agreed to protect life and liberty without regard to birth, nationality, language, race, or religion, the free exercise of religion, the use of any language in the press and publications, and the right to establish and maintain charitable, religious, and social institutions and schools. However, the Turkish government appeared most reluctant to honor its treaty obligations. It promptly took over the administration of the islands, including the judiciary, the police, and the other authorities. On June 26, 1927, the Turkish government, faced with an international outcry, revised its rules on the local administration of Ίμβρος and Tένεδος. But matters for the local Greeks did not improve. In fact, the teaching of Greek in the schools was abolished, and education was aligned with the mainland Turkish system. Except for the articles abolishing the traditional minority schools, the provisions related to the special local administration system of the islands were never implemented. Moreover, during World War II, most of the male Greek population was moved to the eastern borders of Turkey, serving in the notorious labor battalions. They returned to their homes only after the end of the war. Under these conditions, many islanders left for Istanbul or emigrated to other countries, depleting the population. Using as an excuse the flare-up of the Cyprus issue in 1963, the Turkish government decided to implement a plan for dissolving the Greek communities of the islands by launching an ethnic cleansing campaign. This campaign, known as the Dissolution Program, was ratified by the Turkish Ministers' Cabinet in 1964 in secret. According to this program, teaching in Greek schools was banned once more. All Greek schools were closed, seized and put to other uses. All Greek children were compelled to attend Turkish schools. Most of the 300 country churches on Ίμβρος and Tένεδος have either been destroyed or desecrated, turned into stables, army depots and public toilets, following the fate of the 3 centuries-old Orthodox monasteries on the island, which have been razed to the ground since the 1940s. Countless religious and liturgical objects were routinely looted. Greek cemeteries were also desecrated. Moreover, 90% of Greek-owned land was expropriated and houses requisitioned. Greek Orthodox Church property was also seized. Between 1964 and 1970, the Prefecture of the Dardanelles issued more than 25 expropriation decrees. The property was then used to set up state farms, military camps, and even prisons. The property owners, who were very poor, received little in compensation and found it hard to find new jobs. Fishing was prohibited on military security grounds, and all fishing boats were confiscated. There is evidence to show that most of the expropriated arable land has in fact been left unused. Turkish official documents reveal that the state farm established on Ίμβρος on land expropriated in the mid-1960s, about 16 million square meters, remained practically inert. Nearly 13 million square meters was taken up by new villages for Turkish settlers. Almost 1 million square meters was used to build an airport, but despite work on it starting in 1997, there's still nothing but an unfinished airstrip. The single most drastic measure was the Turkish authorities' decision to use Ίμβρος as a penal settlement by establishing an open prison for Turkish mainland convicts. The convicts were left free on the island to terrorize the villagers through robbery, rape and murder. Out of a total surface of 18.6 million square meters expropriated to build an open prison, just 8 million square meters was used for that purpose, and the prison was shut down in 1992. According to British Foreign Office documents, the ultimate intention of the Turkish authorities was to drive the Greek inhabitants out of Ίμβρος altogether. The implementation of the dissolution program resulted in the almost complete disappearance of the once numerous Greek communities of the islands. In 1970, the numbers of Greek origin inhabitants fell to 2,622 on Ίμβρος and 1,400 on Tένεδος. Today there are about 10,000 people on Ίμβρος, of whom only about 300 are of Greek origin and mostly elderly. The rest are Anatolian migrants brought in after 1964. The village of Skinudi, or Dereköy, used to be the biggest in Turkey with a population of 3,000 Greeks and over 1,000 traditional stone houses, most of which remain now in ruins, making it look like a haunted place. In the Greek village of Castro in 1974, on the day of the Turkish invasion of Cyprus, the Greek population was forced to evacuate the village. They were taken to the seat of Ίμβρος province in army trucks. In the 1980s, the Turkish authorities resettled the village with the Turks and guarded the entrances in case the Greeks tried to return. All the males who left the island without serving in the Turkish army were stripped of Turkish citizenship and all adjacent rights. Until 1989, the islands were put under strict isolation. On the pretext of their designation as strategic importance zones, no visitor could travel to the islands without having previously obtained a special permit, which not only caused delay, but also discouraged any communication with the outside world. It's worth noting that until the 1960s, there was only one Ottoman mosque in Ίμβρος, built in the 19th century. The first post-1923 mosque in Ίμβρος built in the late 1960s, catering for the needs of the Muslim settlers, was given the name Fatih Jamiza, meaning the Conqueror's Mosque. It was built right upon the old cemetery of the Greek village of Evlampio, or Yeni Mahalle. Reluctant at first to leave the islands, many of the remaining Greeks succumbed to leaving after being subjected to prolonged pressure. Deprived of their main source of income, the aggrieved farmers abandoned the islands, seeking refuge in Greece, Western Europe, the United States, Africa, and Australia. Nevertheless, the islands have produced their fair share of world personalities. Since 1926, a high-ranking prelate representing the Greek Orthodox community in the two islands has belonged to the Holy Synod of the Ecumenical Patriarchate. Ίμβρος has given the Church two of its most illustrious prelates. The present Orthodox Ecumenical Patriarch, Bartholomeos I, is from Ίμβρος, as was a recently deceased Archbishop of North and South America, Iakovos. Public life on the islands at present enjoys a certain relaxation of security, but it's still under the control of the National Security Council. The administration is conducted by the Provincial Administration Board, whose members are all government officials. The participation of Greeks in the public administration is practically non-existent. The Greek minority is represented only in the communal boards of 3 Greek settlements of Ίμβρος. However, their powers are extremely limited. The major difficulties that the Greek islanders encounter are especially evident in property matters. The National Land Registry, introduced in the islands in the 1990s, is used by the Turkish authorities to legitimize the massive expropriations and seizures of land of the previous years, and to deprive the Greeks of the last remnants of their property. Thanks to non-transparent practices and taking advantage of the absence of Greek landlords, the Turkish authorities either transfer massively properties to the Turkish treasury or give it to the Turkish settlers who claim possession of occupied houses and fields which the Greeks were forced to abandon in preceding decades. There are also many cases in which land ownership is based on forged or falsified documents, while Turkish authorities do not recognize the validity of the Ottoman titles. Moreover, the right to inherit is not recognized by the land registry in the case of non-Turkish citizens. In 3 large villages in Ίμβρος, land registration is still incomplete and property ownership issues remain in abeyance. In the villages of Castro, or Kaliköy, and the Ίμβρος capital Panagia, or Merkez, 95% of property has been recorded in favor of Turkish state or settlers. The 10-year period prescribed by law for contesting registrations has already expired, while the necessary reforms that would allow the original owners to claim their land still remains to be enacted. Reports indicate that in αχτίδα, or Tepeköy, a village inhabited only by Greeks even today, nearly 80% of the registered properties, including 52 homes, have been recorded in the name of the state treasury. On the other hand, Law 5226 of 2004, which extended the effects of a previous law on the protection of natural and cultural wealth to virtually the entire island, is making the situation even harder. The widespread designation of land and buildings as natural and cultural monuments, and the exclusion of user caption as a means of acquiring title to ownership in all areas where the land registry process has not been completed, has entailed extensive confiscation of property. There are 7 Christian villages in Ίμβρος and 1 in Tένεδος. Each village has its own parish church. Further to the parish churches, there's a large number of small country chapels scattered around the island called exoklisia. Despite the fact that all those churches, around 300, constitute part of the heritage of the island, the great majority of them is decaying or in ruins. The ancient church of Aya Marina in the village of Castro, or Kaliköy, was vandalized by the Turks in 1974. Looting is commonplace. In February 1998, priceless relics were stolen from the Church of the Annunciation of the Virgin Mary in the village of αχτίδα, or Tepeköy, on Ίμβρος. 30 icons, Bibles, crosses, and an ornate replica of Christ's tomb vanished. a summer resort reserved for judiciary officials was built on the seaview settlement of Pyrgos after the old church of Saint Anna was completely levelled and destroyed. Moreover, the administration of two parish churches, Agia Marina at Castro, or Kalikioi, the former cathedral of the island, and Agia Varvara at Evlampio, Yeni Mahale, has been assumed by the General Directorate of Foundations, which now controls their property and also appoints their trustees. At the same time, other parish churches like Evangelismos, the Annunciation, in Agridia, or Tepikioi, are functioning in a legal vacuum since Turkish authorities refuse to record the temple itself and the rest of the property in the name of the village's parish. In Tένεδος, the General Directorate of the Foundations and the Turkish Supreme Court refuse to recognize property rights to the only Orthodox parish church of the island, the Dormition of the Virgin Mary, for more than 50 immovables. Seeking just satisfaction, the trustees of the parish appealed in 2003 to the European Court of Human Rights. The teaching of Greek in the island's schools remains banned. In force for the past 41 years is Turkish Law 502, which bans the employment of Greek teachers and Greek ownership of school properties. Former school buildings are being used for commercial purposes. This restrictive law applies only to Ίμβρος and Tένεδος. The establishment of Turkish, free and non-religious education, even if it were the right of the Turkish government to do so, does not necessarily entail the abolition of an existing minority school system, which could well continue to exist side by side with the government educational system. In spite of continuous protests and appeals, a building, which until 1964 had housed a Greek minority school in Gliki, or Eski Bademli, recently opened as a hotel. At the time of its closure, it was the most modern school of the island, built on the exclusive financing and labor of the village's Greek community. The courtyard shared by the building, the church, and the entrance to the village cemetery was closed off with bars, leaving just a narrow passage for the worshippers. Only a few months after the first conversion of a Greek minority school into a hotel, the Muslim head of the joint commune of Skinoudi, or Derikioi, and Sahinkaya, has reportedly leased the Greek minority school of Skinoudi for the same purpose. The few remaining Greeks on Ίμβρος and Tένεδος live in fear and alienation. They have been victims of assault, theft, and even murder, inexcusable on such a small and easily policed island. Policing is, in fact, very lax. In May 2004, a shepherd was found burned and decapitated in his lonely country house. The crime remains unsolved, in addition to the list of unsolved murders of Greeks since the 1970s. In 2005, an 8-year-old man was brutally beaten in Skinoudi, or Derikioi, in the presence of Turkish eyewitnesses. Ίμβρος and Tένεδος have been violently deculturalized. The resettlement of the islands continues. 3 new villages have been constructed and populated with Muslim settlers. There are even a few Arabic-speaking families brought in from southeastern Turkey. Contrary to its aspirations, the sole effect of the environment and culture protection legislation on Ίμβρος has been the confiscation of land belonging to members of the Greek minority. Significant archaeological sites and natural monuments have been left to decay or to destruction. Some of the most typical examples are the archaeological site of Pyrgos, lying within the Ministry of Justice summer resort, the unique array of the Cascaval rocks that are seriously threatened by the excavations designed for the construction of the new marina, and the construction of a surf club right in the middle of the peninsula of Kefalos, Aydınjuk, and its rare sand dunes, and opposite one of the most significant natural habitats of flamingos and other endangered wild bird species. The situation is reflected in the number of reports by the European Commission, the European Parliament, and the Council of Europe. The violations of the Greek minority's rights on Ίμβρος are mentioned in the 2004 and 2005 regular reports on Turkey's progress towards EU accession. Surprisingly enough, the situation on Tένεδος was not addressed in those reports. the EU position drawn up by the Permanent Representatives Committee in April 2005 and endorsed by the Council also calls on Turkey to resolve the problems of the people of Ίμβρος. The mobilization of the Greek minority and the positive response of international organizations to their appeals motivated the Turkish Prime Minister, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, to visit Ίμβρος and Tένεδος in April 2005. It was the first time a Turkish Prime Minister had visited the islands in the 82 years that they have been a part of Turkey. Mr. Erdogan pledged to ensure equal treatment for the Greek minority and to examine its problems. Though his statements appear to reflect a confused idea of the existing situation, Turkish press articles acknowledged that islanders' rights were being violated. Today, in the midst of old ruins but with an indomitable historical spirit, the people of Ίμβρος and Tένεδος are trying to preserve what can be saved. What is even more remarkable, and contrary to what one should normally expect, shortly after the lifting of the access restraint in 1989, many islanders who were forced to leave their birthplace began to visit the islands themselves. Year after year, Ίμβρος and Tένεδος have become the meeting point on the occasion of religious feasts and traditional gatherings of numerous Ymbriots and Tenedians from every corner of the earth. Every year, for example, on the 15th of August, thousands of Ymbriots scattered all over the world return to the island to celebrate the Dormition of the Virgin Mary. The thousands of islanders who go back to their roots are determined to leave behind the traumas of the past and live peacefully together with the Muslim population. Whether this dream will become true depends a lot upon the readiness and willingness of the Turkish state to adopt the necessary reforms which will ensure equal treatment between Muslim and non-Muslims. Unfortunately, there's still a long way to go, despite the fact that there are still many Turkish officials that clearly fail to realize this unique opportunity. There are also some signs that indicate otherwise. High-ranking Turkish government officials have been displaying a conciliatory stance, and Turkish public opinion is moving more in favor of the people of Ίμβρος and Tένεδος. Under those circumstances, there is now a valid hope that positive specific actions will be taken to redress the injustices and discrimination suffered by the Greek minority over the past 82 years. Those actions may be summarized in the following points. To grant to the Greek minority full and equal access to the island's administration. To restitute the injustices resulting from the application of land registry laws and procedures. To recognize property rights for the original landowners and their descendants who owned or possessed properties before 1964. To recognize the rights to inherit to all heirs of the original landowners regardless of citizenship. To restore Turkish citizen status to the indigenous islanders who lost it and their descendants. To return expropriated land that was never used for or ceased to serve the official purposes of the expropriation. To lift the prohibition on Greek minority education. To return the ownership of all Greek minority school buildings of Ίμβρος and Tένεδος to their respective communities. To return all immovable properties to the ownership of the parish church in Tένεδος. To lift all sorts of technical and bureaucratic obstacles that prevent the unhindered access and operation of all churches and church property. To implement all necessary measures for the preservation of natural environment and the archaeological treasures of the islands. To return all traditional houses and buildings designated as monuments of culture to their original owners and to provide all appropriate incentives for their preservation. To lift all bureaucratic obstacles to allow sea communication between Ίμβρος and Tένεδος with the Greek ports.